Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the Rant podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nick Callahan. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, I'll tell you. Going to talk a little bit about what Obama was going into with the college proposal, as well as who is suing who as far as it pertains to the cities of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia. We're going to go a little bit into the rallies around Ireland and who pushed whose buttons and what was the causal effect of why people were rallying in the streets. Also, is the U.S. really going to send troops over to Syria to train them in a 3-year period of time? All that, little more. Rant Podcast, Episode 3. Stay tuned, buckle in. Here we go. Get your helmet on. Rant Podcast. Alright, yeah, you can kill that. We're going right into it, and it was the, I'm sure you guys are still well aware, a big conversation that's going on is America's college proposal. President Barack Obama unveiled Thursday of last week to provide free community college education to all responsible students who are able to hold a 2.5 GPA is garnering immense attention right now. As it should be, but the details still need to be fleshed out, and individual states will have to agree to shoulder a share of that cost, which inevitably will lead to a tax hike at the collegiate level. But the LA Times went on record and they were stating that the proposal fails to address one glaring flaw in the nation's overall system of public and higher education, is that it should all be free. That's the way it is in Germany, for instance, where there is a long tradition of low-cost university study. And in 2014, the last German state holding out against free university education threw in the towel. Now anyone, including foreign students, can study at a German university at public expense. So maybe we're a little behind the 8 ball on that. Maybe there's still a German influence over the American government, and these things are just starting to surface. But we do know that we do need to educate people in order to counter the dumbing down of our society and our culture. Free higher education to qualified students was also the rule in California, where the University of California had no tuition for state residents until Governor Ronald Reagan demanded that in the early 1970s. Once the door was cracked open for tuition charges, it swung wide. Berkeley or UCLA education was pegged at $12,192 for state residents in 2014. Some other American university systems were known for tuition-free education, notably the City University of New York, which maintained the policy until the New York fiscal crisis of 1976. Consider this. When the corporate plutocrat Meg Whitman was running for California governor in 2010, she had no trouble proposing the elimination of the state's capital gains tax, which it brought in more than $10 billion in a decent year. Eliminating all in-state tuition, according to the UC report. Which option would be an investment yielding a greater and broader return to the state? It's the latter. The role of distinguished Californians educated for free at UC before the 1970s is a long one, but it includes former Governor and U.S. Chief Justice Earl Warren, Ralph Bunche, who was the first black Nobel Peace Prize winner, Author Maxine Hong Kingston, the discoverer of plutonium, and later Berkeley Chancellor Glenn Seaborg and Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley. The principle of free higher education for qualified California residents persisted through the 1960s, unrigged by the landmark 1960 Higher Education Master Plan. The plan quoted one leading public university advocate as dismissing the idea of public university tuition as an incomprehensible repudiation of the whole philosophy of a successful democracy upon an educated citizenry. It negates the whole concept of wider spread educational opportunity made possible by the state university's idea. It conceives college training as a personal investment for profit instead of a social investment. A betrayal, really, of the American dream, or of equal opportunity. Because those things could be held back if you're not able to afford a certain thing. They could deny you a grant. Not everybody qualifies for a grant. But this new proposal is kind of like a everybody gets in. We're going to look at a little bit into what the White House had to say when President Barack Obama made his statement late last week. This is still pretty new stuff here. And they went on and pretty much just stated that the president and the America's College Promise proposal, they were to make 2 years of community college free for, again, responsible students. We're looking at the 2.5 GPA rank. You have to stay above 2.5 GPA in order to still qualify for that free tuition. The proposal will require everyone to do their part. Community colleges must strengthen their programs and increase the number of students who graduate. States must invest more in higher education and training, and students must take responsibility for their education, earn good grades, and stay on track to graduate, so that the American taxpayer isn't on the hook paying for a bunch of college dropouts. But the program would be undertaken in partnership with the states, as inspired by new programs in Tennessee and Chicago. If all states participate, an estimated 9 million students could benefit from this. 9 million students can benefit from this if this is approved. A full-time community college student could save an average of $3,800 per year in tuition. And I wonder what the other side of that coin is. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. The first episode we have coming up in a week or two of our Friday night podcast, which we're working on. We had some technical difficulties. That's why this Wednesday morning podcast got to you a little late. It turns into Wednesday evening. We apologize. There was some problems there. But the flip side, coming Friday night, a couple of weeks from now, we'll have Alexander Sipe on, who does work 2 jobs to be able to afford to put himself through community college. But for right now, we're going to go into something a little closer to home here at the Rant podcast, and that's going to be the who's suing who. Okay? As the National Rifle Association is suing Pittsburgh and Philadelphia over gun laws. In this lawsuit, obviously the NRA is the plaintiff, and they are trying to stand up against Pittsburgh as the defendant, as well as Philadelphia in a separate case on the other side of the state. Philadelphia is also going to be pulled into a lawsuit. Okay, also defendants in the Pittsburgh side of that case are defendant William Peduto. I know you know that name because that's the mayor of Pittsburgh. Also a defendant is the Pittsburgh City Council itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through a piece of this court document and give you the factual background on it. So we're going to just be reporting it to you. Okay, this isn't speculation. We're going to give you actual readings from the court document. On November 6, 2014, 18 Pennsylvania Code 6120 was amended to include additional provisions for plaintiff standing and was also amended to allow for the recovery of legal and other fees under certain circumstances. Prior to the amendments of 6120, it provided in a relative part that the general rule A was that no county, municipality, or township may in any manner regulate the lawful ownership, possession, transfer, or transportation of firearms, ammunition, or ammunition components when carried or transported for purposes not prohibited by the laws of this Commonwealth. The amendments also provide several new subsections, and specifically A2, which they title Relief, where it states a person adversely affected by an ordinance, a resolution, regulation, rule, practice, or any other action promulgated or enforced by a county, municipality, or township prohibited under subsection A or 53 PA Code 2962 relating to limitation on municipal powers. They may seek declaratory or injunctive relief and actual damages in an appropriate court. When those rights are infringed on, we have the National Rifles Association who's going to step in and question all of those changes and all of these new subsections written into these amendments to make sure that we aren't having our gun rights, our constitutional rights, embarked on in a negative way. This same type of suit and these same kind of changes to the amendments as far as gun law go are also seen on the other side of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So make no mistake about it, though. Okay, it's not that the people in the governing bodies in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, or Harrisburg for that matter, are coming for the guns. They're not. Okay, but they're trying to write something that the NRA does need to come and step in front of and challenge that, so that those things don't happen in the future. So that governing bodies aren't challenging us at our doorsteps for the guns. Because I don't think that's going to go very well at all for anybody involved. And I'll tell you what you need in a soldier's hand is a gun. A little more national here in a headline was that the U.S. is planning to send 400 troops over to Syria to train Syrian rebels. The U.S. military is planning to deploy more than 400 troops to help train Syrian rebels to fight the Islamic State, along with hundreds of U.S. Support personnel. A Pentagon spokesman put that on record also Thursday of last week. The U.S. military has not yet identified where it will draw its forces from, but the training mission expected to begin in the spring is just outside of Syria. At least that's what Colonel Steve Warren went on record and said. Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia also have offered to host training events for the U.S. to come into Syria and train the Syrian rebels. The Pentagon estimated that it can train more than 5,000 recruits in the first year and get up to about 15,000, which will be needed, as they say, to retake areas of eastern Syria controlled by the Islamic State. Across the border in Iraq, Obama has authorized more than 3,000 U.S. troops to advise and train Iraqi and Kurdish forces. The disclosure of the planned troop deployments for Syria training mission, well, they just came, days? It was a few days after senior U.S. officials met Syrian opposition and civil society leaders in Istanbul to discuss the program. So we're going to have to see where those kind of militant efforts play out. We got to be really, really careful in the Middle East. The U.S. military is still poking at this beehive, because they got stung. Okay, instead of learning from it, they and I don't mean that they should have just laid down and take it by any means. That was tragic, but I think there's a lot of evidence that points to maybe the American government and the American military, along with the NSA and the CIA, all had a hand in that cookie jar. Call me what you want. You could say conspiracy theorist all you want, because I'll take it. When I look at the evidence, buildings, what was it, 1, 2, and 7? I'm sorry, they don't just crumble like that at free fall speed into their own footprint. And that's for nothing. That wasn't a controlled demolition. And look at building 7 a little closer. That's alright, I'll get off of that one. Creeping on up the coastline there, obviously there were the big rallies in Ireland. And people were rallying and protesting because of the water taxes that were squeezing down on them. Their governing bodies in Ireland were taxing the water supply too hard for the people, and it was actually putting some of those lower income families out of water. And that is a problem people need to stand up for. If a governing body is oppressing a people so bad that they can't even get something that should be an inherent right to their life and their survival, like water, something's wrong with that picture. And we have to ask, well, what pushed the Irish over the edge? Where was the tipping point where they finally said, all right, enough is enough? And you could see it in an ever-increasing tax bill hanging over the heads of not just, the squeezed middle, per se, but the squeezed Irish population, along with the mismanagement of a new semi-state company, has pushed people onto the streets to stand up against the austerity measure that threatens to break the back of the coalition. Some Europeans might argue that they have to pay water taxes or charges, but in Ireland, the citizens are already paying increased rates on central tax to accommodate the cost of maintaining and upgrading the water supply and its infrastructure. Also in 2000, Irish people were given an exemption to the Article 9 requirement of the European Commission Domestic Water Directive, which requires European governments to charge for domestic water supply, which was an exemption the current government allowed to expire at the end of 2014. What kind of governing body can look its citizens in the face and sell them on a false elective like they actually have some kind of freedom of choice when it's just like here? They're picking the lesser two evils. Voting systems around the world they got to be reformatted. I remember I had one. I mean, I've known it for a while. I've seen it and felt that was my opinion for a while, that there needed to be some kind of reform to the public debates so that people could really see who these candidates are. There's a little more transparency in it, a little harder line of questioning in it. And I remember the big standout point for me when I came to that conclusion was actually watching a presidential debate. And maybe it was because it was Michelle Bachmann and they knew that she didn't stand a chance at a seat in the White House, and they were just toying with her. But in a presidential debate, I don't think the question, who do you like better, Johnny Cash or Elvis Presley, should come up. I have my opinion. I have my opinion of which one of those people that I would like better. I just don't see what it would have to do with American foreign policy or bettering the culture and the economic status of the United States of America. And that's what we're electing these people to do, is represent the American public in office as a governing body. You vote these people in, and I think those things need to change, because if we are voting on some of the things that are huge speculation that you end up seeing in your living room from your corporate media structures and news outlets, things would be a little different. But you don't have a vote. You didn't vote. You didn't go to a booth and vote if the CIA was going to be torturing people with the rectal feeding and the rectal hydration, the sleep deprivation, all the torture techniques that they used. You didn't vote on that. You had no say in that, but they did it anyway. Because they get to say what's in your best interest. They get to say what's in the best interest of the American public. You see that same kind of corruption all over the place. And something's got to give here. Start asking the hard questions and getting real. Okay? Lift your voice up and at least share information if you can. I'm not saying you have to start a podcast or try to get on the radio or start a television program. I'm not saying any of those things. All those things are great. But how about if it just started small? Just share the information that's out there. There's a lot of information that's public information. You should probably try to get to it and think about it from both sides and come to your own conclusions about it with your own rational thinking, instead of letting the media just program what it is that you're supposed to believe. Look at the facts, okay? And use your head. Think. It's not illegal yet. Think. The Irish people said relatively passive when faced with massive wage decreases and tax increases, cuts to social welfare and other vital resources. But when the issue of water charges hit the headlines, it also hit a nerve with the Irish population. Time after time, Irish Water stepped on the toes of its prospective clients, asking for social security numbers of adults and children with mandatory registration documents that arrived at the gates of homes around the same time the much hated water meters began to arrive. We all know how we love those. And that was all before the rates were even decided upon. Soon it became common knowledge that the conversation angle pitched by Irish Water in their first days and weeks was nonsense. When experts discussed the use of regional meters as being a more practical way to find and manage leaks in the faulty water systems, that was where they had them, because they were able to pass it off as a maintenance necessity and the welfare of the people, and they snuck it under their nose. And when the tax hit it and squeezed the middle of the Irish population, they spoke out, and obviously that trickled down and made the lower income families also speak out. So you just have tens and tens of thousands of people rallying in the street, and we didn't really hear too much about that on CNN or Fox, did we? Because we're too busy listening to what's that woman's name on Fox? Judge Justice, screaming about how she wants to bomb everyone in the Middle East. She's a lunatic. Just be careful who you're listening to in your corporate media. And lastly, just to give a follow-up on something more recent. I know we touched a bit on the attacks in France, obviously, on Charlie Hebdo. We had released a day early at that, the cover of Charlie Hebdo's first cover release, I apologize, after the attacks, where you seen the Prophet Muhammad again, drawn as a satirical cartoon, but this time above it, it said, "All is forgiven," and he was holding the Je suis Charlie, I am Charlie sign. And it raised a whole bunch of new speculation and new tension, and some of the extremist Muslims who are extreme in their faith are rallying again, and stated that the new Survivors issue of the satirical magazine, again Charlie Hebdo, has it really triggered a lot more outrage from Muslim communities all over the world. The worshippers staging protests all week. More are set to take place after traditional Friday prayers, apparently once a week. So Pakistani police fired tear gas, and they used water against these Muslim protesters after this new issue came out, and were stating that I don't know how to speak Arabic or anything, but how it translated, they were saying death to blasphemers. So again, we see something in reflection to like we seen at the time of the initial attacks at the Charlie Hebdo offices. We still see these extremists pushing that agenda to where if you don't believe the same kind of culture and religion and belief structure that they have been in for thousands of years, then they don't really value your life too much. It's, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but they really do put a all bets are off when you talk about our prophet. And that's something that's a kind of mentality that's very, very dangerous, and it does have to come out of the 8th century. The rallies ended up marching out near the county's parliament in Islamabad and speaking out these really kind of scary things where they're calling out for the death of a certain person for drawing a cartoon. There's something wrong there. There's something a little too fragile with that kind of religious belief for it to have really any merit to me. Where people feel that they need to fully load an assault rifle and kill a journalist for drawing a cartoon of their prophet, there's something a little too petty and a little too human for me to really understand. Where you're killing people in the name of your God who's supposed to be a part of a peaceful religion. There's something wrong about that, and it's that these people, like the people that are doing the killing here, and if you're calling out for the killing, you're a sociopath. You're crazy. It has nothing to do with what religion you're in. You're a lunatic. Why are you killing people in the name of your peaceful religion? The Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan is preparing also to rally in Amman with spokesman Murad Adela, saying the group strongly condemned both the killings and the, quote, offensive against the Prophet, and that's as the AP, the Associated Press, reported. Egypt's top religious institution, the Al-Azhar Mosque, has expressed that its outrage at the magazine's new cartoon, describing it as a blatant challenge to the feelings of Muslims who had sympathized with this newspaper. Okay, and that's also according to the Associated Press. But despite that, the deputy of the mosque's Grand Sheikh, Abbas Shuman, urged the Muslims to ignore the cover and show tolerance because anger, quote, will not solve the problem but will instead add to the tension and the offense to Islam, end quote. Muslims in Aleppo, and one more time, this is going back to Thursday of last week, they marched through the southwestern Syrian city, and they were burning the Jeshui Charlie poster as their expression of freedom of speech. That's the other side of freedom of speech, is listening to the things that you don't agree with, and that was their kind of rally. But the thing is people are standing on the side of the Charlie Hebdo attacks in support of freedom of speech, but they weren't standing up saying to scream at the world to kill Muslims. They weren't. Well, Fox News might have been, but the rest of the world wasn't. In Lebanon, the Shiite Muslim militant group Hezbollah said the depiction was, quote, a provocation to the feelings of more than 1.5 billion Muslims in the world and directly contributes to supporting terrorism, fanaticism, and the extremists, end quote. And what they're saying there is that they're fueling the fire. Protesters in the Philippines marched in the southern town. I don't know how to say this right. I do this all the time. I apologize. But Marawi. And in Marawi, Philippines, they were burning images of the magazine's new cover as well. And organizers stated that the freedom of expression does not extend to insulting the noble and the greatest prophet, Allah. And that's something that was reported to The Guardian that I'm sourcing from. And it something has to give here. Obviously, there is a lot of tension in the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. And there has to be is there some way to resolve this without murder? Maybe. How about keep your nose out of it? Let's see what happens. I still think that Saudi Arabia, okay, who we have a militant relationship with, could have acted as a mediator so that we didn't have to get involved. We got enough going on in our own backyard, and we have to start looking here. We have to start looking here, and we have to start thinking about it, because, hey, guess what, people? There's an election coming up. Okay, and the game is rigged. Start looking at things with a little bit of a broader spectrum. Okay, don't play into the rat race. Get informed, get inspired, create, share some information, and we could positively influence the culture and society around us. So, until next time in episode 4, signing off for the Rant Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Callahan. Till the next time, be free, you bunch of savages.